Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Training Unleashed. Today, we're going to talk about something I think people love to talk about, love to complain about, and that is how to have an effective meeting. And I think no one complains about an effective meeting. They complain about the fact that meetings bore them to death and they hate them. We, of course, have the perfect guest. But before we get into introducing the guest, I want to thank our friends at C-Suite TV and C-Suite Radio for sponsoring. On behalf of Training Unleashed, I want to welcome you all to the show and remind everyone we're now on YouTube. And if you go to YouTube, it's Training Unleashed Network. And of course, you can go to our website, trainingunleashed.net. Today, I have Nina Sunday with me. She's coming to us from Australia. She's the founder of Brainpower Training. She is a certified professional speaker, which I'll tell you is a big, big, big deal. And she has two podcasts of her own, but she's really a communication expert. And so, Nina, I'm going to start off with kind of an interesting question because I've been thinking about this question the whole time. And it's not specifically about meetings, which I know is your true expertise, but I think it'd be great to start off with, why is your company called Brainpower?
Well, it's how it started. The first 10 years in business, I was focused on speed reading. I was niched in speed reading and memory. And then I had a business angel come on board and we decided to expand the business, grow the business, and we wanted to rename it. And so Brainpower gave us the opportunity to be more than just speed reading and to work with upgrade the brain power of people that do our courses. So we moved from speed reading into all the other soft skills areas. So, productivity, communication.
That is fascinating. I've tried speed reading. I'm severely dyslexic, and you can suffice it to say it wasn't effective for me.
Well, I say 50% of people with a degree of dyslexia can achieve the skill, but the other 50% can't. So, yeah.
Without getting into it, I'm very, very dyslexic.
Fine.
So let's get to meetings.
Yeah.
People hate them. I mean, they do. They dread them. They talk about them behind their back, etc. Let's just start with the root causes. Why are meetings, in your opinion, from your experience, ineffective or unenjoyable, maybe?
Well, number one, people do not think about the meeting experience of their participants. And so they're not thinking, oh, I should get the agenda to them ahead of time so they can prepare, so they know if they have to contribute. And that's when I ask people, I survey them before I do a workshop, what's the biggest bugbear? And they'll say, no agenda, or the agenda arrives only at the meeting.
I'm going to say I've been guilty of that, as many people do. So what advice do you give to the people? Because, I mean, look, this is a group of trainers, HR professionals, operational people. This audience does meetings. So what advice do you give them to maybe divide it into two things? What is the basic, simple advice you can give people to take their meetings to the next level? And then we'll go to what's the advanced advice to the people that are really committed. But what are the simple things that people can do to make their meetings better?
I believe the one thing that will really shift how meetings are run is for the agenda. If you're the discussion leader preparing the agenda, prepare it in a way that you schedule everything that everybody needs to listen to or participate in at the top, and then let people peel away and leave the meeting as they are no longer required. Because a number of people say, I sit there until the end because I don't want to be rude and say, can I go now? Just make it that it's phased attendance, that everybody's at the start and then people peel away, and then you're going to have greater productivity and people will be so grateful.
I've never heard that idea before. And that's cool. I like it. Keep going. Let's hear some more.
Number two, I've had clients who I always ask send me an agenda ahead of time. And I noticed that on the agenda, the discussion leader was also the chairperson, was also the minute taker. And I went, why are you multitasking? How can you do all three really well? I say, always have a separate minute taker, but the minute taker is not a passive clerk, as we say, not just taking notes. Their role is to be proactive and listen and make sure that every action item is captured. And I've seen minutes where the issue was discussed, but no action was recorded. I can see that they probably just got distracted by something else. That's where the minute taker can go, excuse me, what specifically has to be done about this issue? And it's this what specifically or who specifically is the main question that minute takers can be asking.
I love that. I think a lot of times meetings do have discussions, but not clarity. So that's a big one. I'm going to ask this question because the AI minute takers are real. A lot of people will do them. In fact, I just had a meeting yesterday where someone's AI note taker came into the meeting 10 minutes before they did because they were running late. What do you think of AI note takers? I mean, I assume that somebody could be responsible to ask that important question who's not literally taking the minutes. Are they good or is it really much better to have a real minute taker?
Well, you need a human to actually go through and extract the bits that you want, because an AI note taker from the I don't use it myself, but if I want a transcription, I often will have my dictation app on my phone going for certain parts, and I believe that a minute taker should work with a transcription because they can then just very quickly fast forward through what actually was said and then extract the key ideas. The minute taker has to then maybe do it as bullets or dot points. And I also believe that minute takers should really try and get their minutes put together within the same hour or so of running the meeting, because if you understand the curve of forgetting, within 2 days, most humans forget 2/3 of what they experienced 2 days before. So you've got to start doing your minutes same day or you'll forget the detail. And also then you're not so reliant on the transcription. It's transcription plus memory. And your job is to just extract the key points and use white space, not make it like, I call it like a brick of words, a sea of words. You want it so people can see easily through, quick bullets. Oh, I have to do this. I have to do that. Who does what by when?
Okay. So let's go back to the leader. So we got the minute taker role done, and you've got a person that's facilitating the meeting. What you described 3 roles. What were those again? The chair.
The discussion leader, the chair, and the minute taker. And then
So
you've got
what is the difference between the chair and the discussion leader?
Well, a lot of discussion leaders don't think there is a need for another chair, but the chair is like the observer that sees the gaps, that sees the patterns. And the chair can also, well, I'm going to backtrack a little. Agenda items should have a time allocated. So the chair can also be a bit of a timekeeper, although you can also have a separate timekeeper role, but usually the chair can do that. And they can also make sure that there's conversational equality. In other words, there comes a point, maybe when you're leading to a decision, to actually make sure that everybody's opinion has been heard and we haven't got the introvert deep thinkers sitting on their ideas. You want all the ideas to come out, because research shows that if you have conversational turn taking in a meeting, those teams are more effective.
So I want to talk about those introverted people hiding their ideas, because I think that's really important. But first, just to get clarity, would the chair generally be maybe the most senior person in management, or is it a role simply to help the person that's leading the meeting and making sure that they're pointing out gaps that person might be missing?
It's the latter. It's they're pointing out the gaps. They don't have to be the senior person at all. In fact, I suggest you rotate the role so it builds the capability of even junior members. But for that to happen, you really need to have some sort of a cheat sheet. So they're reading up about the role. And if they don't perform the chair role in a way that an experienced chair would do, well, then take them aside after the meeting and give them a bit of feedback so they can learn.
It's a good idea. And now the leader, is this a person who's a trained facilitator? Is this a person in senior management? The role of the leader.
It's whoever's calling the meeting.
Okay.
Yeah. So whoever has decided that there should be a meeting and it can't be dealt with with an email, that they're the discussion leader. So it's not a discussion leader on behalf of someone else. They're the people running the meeting because they want those decisions to be discussed. They can assign certain topics to other people. That's a great idea. Make it participatory. Yeah.
Okay, so let's get back to the introverts who are keeping and hiding their ideas. What are the tips for the facilitator to get those people to share? What would you suggest?
Well, there's a couple of things. Often there's maybe some long-winded discussion, and when people know when people are going on, maybe we need to have time limits on giving an opinion. But I'll give you one thing, and Senator Susan Roberts over in Congress in some years ago used a talking stick to break up an impasse between the Democrats and the Republicans. And a talking stick was really just a beaded stick that she was given from Africa. And she passed it around, and each person, one at a time, had the opportunity to say their opinion with a time limit and pass it on. And that broke up that impasse. And I say you can just take any sort of unusual stick or any object. In Golding's novel, The Lord of the Flies, they use the conch shell and say, all right, let's hear from everybody and pass it around. This is in person. Remotely, you can have a remote virtual talking stick. But the talking stick idea is really good because I've used it in workshops, face-to-face workshops. People hold it like a microphone, but you can hear a pin drop when people are giving their opinion. They know it's only a 1 minute or 2 minute opportunity. And it works for the introverts because they only really want to speak for 1 or 2 minutes, but what they say can really be quite pointed and they can nail it.
Yeah. One thing that I do, I always have a fear that certain people have power. It could be power granted to them by their position or power just by their personality and their nature. And that when that person speaks, everyone now starts to echo because that person has such power. So I like to direct conversations at the beginning away from that person so that there's freedom to speak in the room. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, groupthink is a real problem. And it can actually lead to companies making wrong decisions. And a classic one was the VW company when they decided they would try and cheat government tests of emissions by putting in software that only kicked in when the test was happening. So if you know anything about the Volkswagen story.
I remember it. It
Yeah.
was a huge debacle. It cost them tremendous amounts of money as well, but probably more importantly, brand degradation.
And I believe a CEO went to prison for a certain period, so a European CEO. But the thing is, and it was put down to really the engineers being overridden by, the dominant fast talkers that said, yes, we can do it. And so if people are introverted and have a bit of an integrity issue, they might feel, oh, I can't go against the wave, So that's why I actually came up with a really good idea from one of my own podcast guests. He said, always have a devil's advocate in the room. And that devil's advocate also rotates as well. And they're the ones that actually bring up have you thought about this and have you thought about that? And it's a bit like debating where in debating competitions, you might be assigned to the negative, you're on the negative side, whereas you might harbor your own personal positive opinion, but it's a discipline to be able to argue against your own opinion. So having a devil or a devil's advocate role in the company could be a great idea. But that was a guest by my guest, Chris Dyer, in his book.
Hey everyone, this episode is brought to you by the Learning Network. Speed up your testing process with QuizBase, one of the Learning Network's many resources. Our well-structured quizzes are easy to customize and self-scoring. Whether you need a standalone test or integrate with products like Skillshare, QuizBase has the solution. Visit learning.net to learn more or to do a demo. I read somewhere, and I don't remember what, but different hats, that you would give out different hats and you would keep moving the hat. And one of the hat was a devil's advocate. One of the hat was a question asker.
That's probably related to Edward de Bono's 6 thinking hats, do you think?
Could be. Maybe take a moment and explain what that means.
Well, I'm not an expert on de Bono's 6 thinking hats. I have read it, but it's not off the top of my tongue what I can explain what each of the 6 hats are. But I have met, I've been to a conference where Edward de Bono was presenting, and I got a photo taken with him because he coined the phrase lateral thinking, and he was one of the very early thinkers. He's now passed on, so we owe a lot of gratitude to Edward de Bono.
Yeah, it's interesting as I sit here and I think about this, and I'm going to say something that's not going to make me look very good, but when I facilitate a meeting where I have a desired outcome, which in theory, you don't need to have a meeting if the person who's leading the meeting already knows the outcome they want. But here nor there, I would always have the first person I asked to speak, someone I knew would say what I wanted them to say. Because
that's a great tactic to do.
because the groupthink would come in. I, in essence, was using groupthink to my advantage. I no longer do that because I recognize the dangers of it. I've actually shifted to a thing I call the kernel of truth.
Lovely.
Where I listen to why other people are right rather than being a manipulative person. I used to be very manipulative. So I took a lot of personal development work. I'm probably sharing more than I should right now.
No, personal development is good. In fact, not enough people do it. And I've made a point all through my life. There's professional development, but there's also personal development workshops. And I would do a weekend workshop like that at least once a year. And I tell you what, after my divorce, the workshop that had a forgiveness module in it, a forgiveness process.
Yeah.
My life, the whole weight went off my shoulders, and I've, followed forgiveness ever since. So these are the things that make us better people.
They do. They do. Could you maybe talk a little bit about the different types of meetings? Because some meetings are can be 10 minutes, just give everyone up to date reporting in. Some meetings are brainstorming. Some meetings are like annual planning meetings. Can you just talk about the different kinds of meetings and what and how they should be run differently?
Well, of course, a brainstorm meeting, definitely you want conversational equality, but you've got to be careful because brainstorming can actually, people can start to harbor their own idea, and it becomes like a banner that they're waving. With brainstorming, there's a little matrix that I recommend, which is dividing your ideas into low effort and high effort, and low impact and high impact. And the most doable ideas are low effort and high impact. And the second doable ideas are high effort, high impact, which might take longer and might need more agreement, wider in the organization. And if you get to high effort, low impact, you don't want to do that idea at all. And I've been in committees where one person harbored this one thing that I thought, this is going to be high effort and I cannot really see a benefit. But it was his idea and he was running with it. But it never actually came to fruition. But
I would,
that's brainstorming. You've got meetings. What doesn't happen in agendas is people often list topics, but they don't list the question or the decision that they're there to discuss. They might say, you know, oh, look, for want of a better one, paying for tea and coffee. Because I
yeah,
know one company that decided to make employees pay for their own tea and coffee and biscuits. Deciding whether to charge for tea and coffee. That's the decision. Put that in the agenda, not tea and coffee. So a lot
yeah.
of people just name the topic, but they don't
They
name the
don't,
issue.
they don't name the outcome, the need to be desired.
Yeah,
That's a good
yeah.
point.
Mm.
So have you heard of the concept of a stand-up meeting? And what do you
Oh,
think?
yeah, I often recommend that. That sometimes they call it a huddle. And I know, for example, the Apple store, I've been there at 9 a.m. in the morning, and they're all in small teams having their stand-up meeting for about 10 minutes before the start of the day. A stand-up meeting is great because people won't sit back and relax, and it won't go on forever because people want to just get to the nub of the meeting and then move on. So stand-up meetings are great. Yeah. That will shorten a meeting. There are lots of ways to shorten a meeting. Another way to shorten a meeting is it could be the chair or it could be the discussion leader might, instead of people all expressing their opinion and going on and on and on, you can actually gauge the temperature of the meeting by saying, look, let me just have a quick indication. Who thinks that when we do go for a vote, we'll probably say yes. And if everybody's hand goes up, you say, well, why don't we vote now? You can save a lot of time. So it's up to the chair or the discussion leader. The chair can suggest it. Look, I think let's just find out how people are likely to vote. Ask the question, and then suddenly you've cut off all that time. That's great.
Yeah, no, I like that. I like that a lot. Um, I would love it if you could maybe share with me a case study of a company that was like, not the name of the company, because that's really irrelevant, that was completely dysfunctional. No one wanted to go to meetings that you worked with, helped with convert, what the key things were, and then what the result was.
Well, I asked them to send me. I asked the company for each person to send me a copy of minutes that they'd either written and compiled or received. And the coordinator decided that they wouldn't do that. They would just send me a set of meetings from one person, a person who, as I saw, was multitasking, was being chair and discussion leader and minute taker. And I could see where there were so many holes in the process. In other words, they'd be discussing something, but there was no action. There were so many things where it was a question whether we do something, but the column for what's the action or who's doing taking an action, or it might be left to, oh, the so-and-so team's going to do that. Well, there's a principle called the OPER principle, one person ultimately responsible. You can't say that team is going to do it because then nobody's going to do it. You need to actually allocate one person ultimately responsible. So I saw there were all these issues and discussions and topics, but only a third of them actually had the name of the person doing the action. And I asked the coordinator, will this person be at the meeting? Because you sent this to me with a view to handing it out to everybody. I don't have to say what the holes are. The holes are pretty obvious, but will that person be in the room? Because they would, one, we can't talk about someone's style of writing minutes without them being in the room. Or he said, oh, I want them to be in the room. Yeah, well, you want them to be, but will they be? As it turned out, they weren't. And that was the one person they wanted this workshop for, but I could tell there was a lot of ego involved. This person was obviously a top dog in the company, and that's great because they're the rainmaker. But at the same time, they probably could do with a dash of humility to understand that maybe everything they do isn't turning to gold. And maybe people are a bit bored with their meetings because it's all they're doing most of the talking, and they're even doing the minute taking.
So I did a meeting, and I'd love to get your feedback on what you would have done. So I interviewed everyone because it was a 3-day strategic retreat. So it was not a short meeting, it was a long meeting. And I interviewed everyone beforehand, and everyone said that no one in the meeting will voice an opinion that contradicts anything the CEO says, because the CEO will seek vengeance on them, and that the meeting will simply be a rubber stamp of whatever the CEO says, because even though people had vastly different opinions and recommendations, that everyone was afraid of the retribution that would come. Never seen anything like it. What advice would you give that client?
Well, who am I? Who is the client in this instance? Because it's obviously not that person, is it? Not the person.
That person is the client. That's the person who engaged me to facilitate the meeting. And I said,
Oh,
as part of my facilitation, I interview everyone that's going to come, understand everyone's expectations, understand what the agenda is, because I want to understand all the personalities before I facilitate the meeting.
well, see, when I'm talking about meetings, I'm usually talking about decision-making meetings where people have come for, the half hour or hour, and then they go away again. What you're talking about is actually a 3-day facilitation. I would, if you had any inkling of that person's style, I would maybe have set it up at the start saying, and at the end, would you want me to report back on what I discover and if there's any room for improvement? So maybe get agreement on, does he want my feedback, but he or she. But you don't need to have done that ahead of time when you realize that there is some feedback to be given. So I think you have to ask, I was able to see where there were lots of rooms for improvement. Would you be open to hearing that? Now, they may say yes and they may say no, but it's up to you. I think you would have to actually take it one step at a time and not give them a blast of everything, and see how they're taking each piece of feedback before you give them the big one. And there's
Yeah.
probably a big one that you want to give them. And if they're accepting the others, fine. And if they're brushing it off, I wouldn't give them the big one, because you want more work from them, don't you?
I will tell you what I did.
Tell me.
I asked the person who was the CEO to always speak last so the conversation could happen before him.
Right.
And I did a survey anonymously of all the employees on the important topics. So when we started a new topic, I would say, based on my interviews and the survey I did, here is the ideas that were generated, how many people supported these ideas, so that it would be anonymously shared with the group, so that somebody could see ideas that were not, that people had ideas other than what the CEO wanted. One didn't say CEO idea. They were just like, here are 5 or 6 ideas that people gave me in the interviews, and then people voted on which ones they liked the most to start the meeting.
Well, that's great. So you knew ahead of time what that person was like.
Well, I did. I mean, and
Yeah,
I learned it more after I started doing all my interviews.
that's right. That's
Got a
right.
little scared, I might add.
Well, I always do an online survey that's anonymous, and I've realized now that I probably need to tell them that it will be shared with everyone else, because sometimes people say things and I go, well, I don't actually include it. I'll put it up in big print on like a poster on the wall for people to see it. Sometimes I'll remove it because I go, they'll know who that is and they might be embarrassed by what they said.
This wasn't an open-ended survey. This is like, how to increase sales. Here are 10 ideas that I got from the group, which, everyone gets 2 votes, pick 2.
Oh, that's a great idea.
Yeah. So it wasn't, I've worked with clients and done 360s and things like that, which
Yeah, yeah.
can, sometimes need to be wordsmithed. But so, Nina, I'm just going to share this with the audience. I have never met a person in my entire life more passionate about effective meetings than you. When I do the pre-work for this training, I ask people questions, and Nina gave me the most elaborate list of ideas and suggestions and things of that nature. You're really an expert on meetings. And I think the audience would love to know more, because you're in Australia, about your company and how do you work with companies that are, let's say, in North America. And then we'll, of course, after that, we'll get to your offer.
Well, that's really easy. I'm a twice certified virtual presenter. I've got a setup a video room here. I can pull the flip chart around and I can do it live. I can be standing up and have a flip chart behind me. I don't have to have a slideshow the entire time, or I can run the slideshow in the background on this is a real background, not a virtual one. That's my TV. But I can run the slideshow on the TV, but I can still be in the screen and have that one-on-one connection with people. We can do polls, we can do breakout rooms. So I have a 2-hour leading effective meetings remote workshop that I run periodically, and I can do it exclusive for a team, and then I can customize it. We can do an online survey ahead of time and work out the real topics that people want to focus on in that 2 hours. In a face-to-face, I am sometimes over in North America and Europe. So when that happens, I've delivered sales training over in the UK, for example. So I get overseas about once a year. So if we align it with a date that I'm already going to be there, I can work one-on-one, face-to-face in person in your workplace. So contact me at nina@ninasunday.com.
By the way, great email. A great email address. Give your email address one more time.
Nina, Nina, at ninasunday.com.
Yeah, really great. I love the email. I want to share my number one tip on meetings right now, because I think this is important.
Please do.
And that is to have a conversation with the team about how meetings can be more effective. And there is no better way to do that than to have somebody like Nina. Doesn't have to be Nina, but Nina's pretty good at this, who can help facilitate the discussions on how to have effective meetings and how to make the meeting more effective. Because, I don't know if Einstein really said this, but the saying goes, the definition of sanity is doing the same thing over again and expecting different results. And if you can bring in somebody with outside expertise to help facilitate and train people on effective meetings, you're going to improve your meetings. So I just wanted to, in one regard, point out the importance of having this conversation, and the other, that Nina might be like the right person because of her background and her expertise. But Nina, you have an offer for everyone. And if you would kindly share what your offer is, I would appreciate that.
Yes, indeed, Evan. I have a little mini book that will summarize a lot of key ideas that we didn't even get the chance to discuss today, on ways that you can improve meetings, shortening them, making them more collaborative, and just different things like I mentioned at the top, which is phasing attendance. And honestly, that will make such a huge difference. I do have my business website for Brainpower Training. It's in Australia, so it's got a .au on the end. So it's brainpowertraining.com.au. And that's where you'll find all the signature programs, including leading effective meetings. But if you want the mini book, just email me at nina@ninasunday.com, because that's easy to remember.
Okay, that is definitely, so it's brainpowertraining.com.au for your company website. nina@ninasunday.com for the email address.
Yeah.
And by the way, because I have the list, she has a lot more to talk about on meetings than we have covered. So I would definitely go and take advantage of getting the free book for sure. Nina, we always end the meeting with one tip. If you had one tip to share with the audience, what would that one tip be?
When you do your agenda, do an agenda with 3 columns, and on the left will be the topic, and a time allocation. The middle column will be the decision and the points that you want to raise around that topic. And on the right-hand side, any specific participant that is likely to be called upon for their opinion about that topic. And then they know to be prepared to make a contribution at the meeting.
Great tip. Great tip. I like that. That's a great format. On behalf of the Learning Network, Nina, thank you for being on the show. Audience, thank you. Without you, we wouldn't have a show. Also, thank our sponsors, C-Suite TV and C-Suite Radio. Remind everyone we're now on YouTube, Training Unleashed Network, or go to our website, trainingunleashed.net. Everyone have a great day.